Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Programming by Stealth, and this is Tidbit 14, recorded October 25th, 2025. I'm your host, Allison Sheridan, and of course, I'm joined by your co-host, Bart Buchatz. How are you doing today, Bart?
I'm doing good. It's nice that we're on lucky 14. I didn't like recording 13. I'm a bit dextrocophobic, you know.
Well, we have been gone for a hot minute here, are taking our annual leave that we never announced before, but I think this time we did, right?
We did. I'm just not sure we set the right expectation for when we'd be back.
I think we said a month or something, and it's been 3 or so, 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's been a while. Although, good news, I'm booked into the shorter annual leave scheme again. So January is my month for podcasting and cool stuff again. So I'll have lots of stuff in the can and I'll get us through to about June.
Then we don't know what's going to happen. Well, we've got a fun topic here that actually sort of started in a chit-chat episode of the NosillaCast. So why don't you set us up?
Yeah, so my sort of mission for 2025 in work was to become first-hand familiar with AI within the a bunch of confines I explained in that chit-chat. And one of the things I'd said is we talked in that chit-chat very generally about sort of AI in general and the generic chatbots. And I said that one of the things that was working extremely well for me was using much more task-specific tools like an IDE with an AI integration for programming and the terminal with an IDE with an AI integration for terminally stuff. And we promised 2 follow-ups. One about programming, hello, and one about the terminal, which we are going to have as a Taming the Terminal installment, since we haven't closed that, right? It's still available to us whenever we feel like it, and I feel like it.
Right. For anybody who hasn't been following along for 25 years here, Taming the Terminal was a pretty much sewed up series. I think it was 41 long, and then we added a couple more to 43.
We're on 43.
Right.
Yeah, there we go.
So we could have a 44 and round it out.
Yeah, well, I don't think it'll ever be quite over because while the terminal isn't changing at the rate of like AI, it is still evolving. So I don't think we should ever force ourselves to say no more.
Sure.
But we have covered the really, really basics very well, and it's now a resource we can refer to, but I still like to top it up with some new stuff every now and then.
There you go. There you go. By the way, I just sent a copy of the Taming the Terminal book to Teg Bushman as a gift, a physical copy of the book as a physical gift for his helping me move my server over to a new version of Rocky Linux.
If I had longer arms, I could dramatically drop one on the desk so people hear how much content there is in that series.
Wait, I've got one right behind me. It lives right here on this desk. All right, but that's not the subject of today.
No, so I've been using AI for all sorts of things. It has been quite useful, and we talked about that on the chit chat. But one of the places where it like blew my socks off was in coding, and I was very skeptical, very, very, very skeptical. And I've really been enjoying it. And strangely enough, it's becoming more useful when I stop treating it as a toy and experimenting with it, but using it for reals. It's way better in the real world than it is at pet projects, which is interesting, but it actually makes sense.
Okay.
So I'm going to give a little bit of context here from my experience because these tools are so flexible or generic or multi-purpose that I think everyone's actual experience will differ. So this is my experience where I have found it useful and some tips that I have found that have helped me. And I hope an amount of them are useful to everyone. It'll be a different piece for everyone. And I doubt anyone's going to do exactly what I do. But I still think it's worth talking about.
Yeah, no, I think what you've, hot tip, I've actually read the show notes already, but I think you give flavor around those examples that explain how your thinking goes. And I think that's what's the value here.
Yeah. And so a very important piece of context here is that my role in work has changed in recent years from being a sysadmin, I call it a dog's body sysadmin, right? I was doing
Yeah,
the
what's that
daily
mean?
work. Dog's body is an English phrase for work a day.
Okay, working like a dog.
Yeah, but it's not quite. So, a dog's body is basically the person who does the boring, menial, vitally important work that keeps everything going, but gets none of the praise. You're just the people making everything work.
Okay. Like I thanked the woman who cleans the windows on the inside of my coffee shop. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's why it's always clean, right?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So the sysadmins are just there making everything go and assuming sysadmins are good at their job. No one has a clue they're there. Only bad sysadmins attract attention. Right. So I was doing that for years, and I probably wouldn't have had as much use from AI because I had the luxury of being very focused on one or two technologies for often years at a time. There was years where everything I did was Bash and or Perl. And then it was JavaScript through Node.js with the odd little bit of Bash and Perl. But now that I'm in my new role as cybersecurity specialist, I just did a quick list of what I've been using in the last month. I have a whole bunch more time in Excel than I ever had before. I'm starting to like it, by the way. I'm spending a lot of time processing JSON files with JQ. I'm really glad we did that here on Taming or Programming by Stealth, because a lot of security tools, rather than using XML like they used to do 10 years ago, now report their answers in JSON. And so being able to do JQ is so helpful.
That's good. Yeah, you get to use it. That's fun.
Yeah. It's also really fun when you see the old sysadmin folk who've been using grep all their life and you show them some JQ and it's like, oh my God, you've made fire. It's great.
Nice.
Plenty of shell scripting because you're always automating things when you're doing cybersecurity. The other place data goes is data lakes, which means you query them in Microsoft land with KQL.
Data lakes? What's a data lake?
Yeah. So a data lake is a place where you put all of your data without having to give it really precise structure like tables in a database. It's a place where you can just say, here's a bunch of fields and a bunch of values, and you throw it all in the data lake, and then you can query all of it. So imagine lots of logs have IP addresses, but they're not all the same shape, right? Some of those logs would be one set of fields and another set of logs would be a completely different set of fields. But in a data lake, you just say, tell me everything you know about the IP, blah, blah, blah.
Huh.
You can see how in cybersecurity, being able to pull together all of your different logs in one data structure and query them all in one language would be very valuable. And KQL, if you live in Microsoft land, is the language. PowerShell, right? There's a reason I'm so keen to teach it here on Programming with Stealth. I'm doing a lot of PowerShell these days. And not just on Windows, a lot of it on the Mac.
This is a lot of different languages to be rolling around in.
Yeah, and then probably the biggest one with the biggest amount of mental headspace is a Linux automation tool called Ansible, which is... It uses YAML for most of its files, and it uses the IDEs format, which is strangely still common. You know it for your MySQL configuration: square bracket, name of section, close square bracket, name equals value, name equals value. PHP.ini is in the INI format.
Okay.
It's actually from Windows 3.1.
So that's where I'd heard of it, and I always heard it called INI.
Yeah, it stood for initialization. So there were Windows initialization files. So I call them, or I always heard them called Windows INI files.
Okay.
And also something called Jinja 2, which is a bit like Mustache, but it's just different enough to break my head.
No. So we're not going to learn all of these today, right?
No. But what I want you to understand is that I have to deal with all of these sometimes within a week, which means I need help. Like when I'm using these AI tools, I'm using them in my IDE. And so the tool knows I am working in PowerShell today, or I am working in JSON, or I am working in whatever. And then when I ask questions, it actually gives me the right answers, because I'm asking a lot more questions than I used to, because I can't keep all of, or even if this is all in my short-term memory, it's probably filed in the wrong bucket. Right? I'm using,
Right.
JQ syntax in my KQL or God only knows what, So I definitely need more help than I used to keep all of this straight in my head at the same time.
This reminds me of a roommate of mine who took Italian from 8 to 9 in the morning, Portuguese from 9 to 10, and Spanish from 10 to 11.
Oh my
And by
God.
noon, she couldn't speak anything at all.
Maybe Esperanto, yeah. Just mix it all together. And I think sort of the biggest thing I've found is that it's a really good helper. And every time I see Copilot used as a name, I'm just reminded how spot on it is, because I am in charge. At all times, I am flying the plane here. But gosh darn, it's helpful to have a little assistant on the sideline offering you helpful things like a Copilot when you're flying an airplane.
Right. Not do all this stuff for me, but
No.
I need your assistance. When I look over and say, "What's my altitude?" Can you check that?
Yeah, exactly. Or do the checklist for landing, please, right? The thing will walk you through all sorts of useful stuff. Yeah, it's helping you, not replacing you. No need to be afraid. Yeah, it's been a very interesting experience. So in order to get the most out of it, I'm a computer scientist by training before I became a sysadmin or a cybersecurity specialist. So I kind of like to be theoretical. And I studied AI in 1999, I think we did our AI course. And what's really disturbing is how the theory hasn't changed very much. What's changed is how much computing we have. So we learned about neural networks, and we always thought they could be great one day, but it's just not realistic to have that much memory and that much compute power. Only it is. And so the things we were doing as sci-fi when I was at university are now in the sidebar of my IDE, which is cool.
So it's almost like science fiction coming to life, right?
Yeah. But it means that I have a pretty good understanding of how these things work, which is quite helpful. Because I think there's there's a couple of things to keep in mind, but the first is that these bots are trained on millions of lines of other people's code. They will produce code that is about the average of the average line of code.
And by average, what do you mean?
As in, you take all of the world's programmers and you average them.
Is it like there's a bell curve of the way that thing would be written, and it's the one in the middle?
Kind of, yeah. So the way I sort of think about it is, the AI is better than half of the people writing code, and half of the people writing code are better than the AI.
Okay. So the AI is better than me.
Right. And the thing is,
because I'm not above average.
Which is why it's so powerful, because it's really good at getting people up to a point beyond where they are for half of their career. And then it's really good at getting you started. Because when you're better than the AI, it's not useless. It's far, far, far from useless. The empty page is bloody annoying. It takes a lot of boring effort to get to something that's worth fine-tuning. And the AI will just get you straight to the point where you're into the fine-tuning, to the finessing. And that saves me so much work. It's great. But the thing to bear in mind is your context really matters. So you have a problem, hypothetically, right? Mm-hmm. You have a problem that you need to solve now. And if it gets you the answer, you're finished. Well, LLMs are perfect for that. Because it doesn't matter if they're failing to do 50 rare edge cases. They're not what you're doing right now. It does what you need right now. You're finished. You take that same code and you deploy it into a real-world production environment where it's expected to live for a decade, working on real data. All those edge cases will happen. So that same code is utterly unfit for the job.
Okay.
So context matters.
So one thing I'd stick in there, I've said this a lot on Programming by Stealth, is you always say I just haven't had enough experience yet, but I find it difficult to imagine, for example, what stupid thing a user might do with my code. They might type in a slash where I told them to put a number. I'm not good at thinking of all those things that could go wrong. And I can ask an LLM to do that. What are all the stupid things someone might do with this field that I then need to write some protections around? And
That's a
I
really
think it's
good way
good
to
at
use
that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not actually something I've even thought of. But that's what I said, right? There's so many things these things can do. That hadn't even occurred to me to ask it to figure out the
edge cases. Yeah.
See, one of the things you get when you write a lot of code is you've had the edge cases hit you in the face hard.
Right.
And so
right.
I'm aware of many of them. Because you spend half an hour debugging them and it's like one teeny little thing. And you don't forget that again. So, but what you end up doing then is you take what the LLM gives you when you're not working on a quick and dirty project. If it gives you what you want, you're done, move on, do something else, great. But if you're working on longer term code, you still take what it gives you, but you double check its work. So if it says you should be using this parameter and it works for your test data, read the docs, because the docs will describe that argument's edges, right? This argument expects blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, what does it say it'll do? Oh, it'll throw an exception. Is there a try catch around this? Why, no, there isn't. So this won't fail gracefully. This will fall over in a heap. Okay, well, I need to add some error handling here. Or this really can't ever get a zero pass to it. Oh, better stick some conditional statements in front. So you basically fine tune, check that it does what you think it does and not approximately what you think it does. Because if it's working for your test cases, it does approximately what you think it does. But maybe you need to be a little more sure. And add the checks and add the error handling. And now you have good code. But you are going to need to do that little bit of polish, right? That's what I mean by you take it as a starting point and you don't stop.
Right. And
if
asking it,
this code has life.
Asking it to explain what does this line mean, and give me the documentation that I can see that this flag means that.
Yes. Yeah, and a lot of these tools will show their homework. They will give you the link to their source, and they're the tools I really prefer, because then when it's important, I can really tell. And sometimes just the domain name is enough. If I'm working in PowerShell and it's getting its information from learn.microsoft.com, good.
Probably, right?
That's where I would have gone. And Microsoft is very verbose. Your summary is more useful to me than me having to read all that.
Right. But if it's from Reddit, for example, maybe not so much.
Be more, when I see the answer coming from somewhere like that, I say, can you link me to the official documentation? And then I get a link to wherever it's really from, right? Could be Red Hat's website for Ansible, could be whatever. But then I do more checking.
A friend of mine sent me something that was definitive about a car we were looking at, and this is a fact. And when I followed where it came from, it was a Reddit post that was quoting somebody on X. But somebody wasn't the car company. It was just like a fan a person. And it's like, okay.
And I'm sure they were very emphatic. I'm sure the language made it sound very certain.
Yeah. Well, this wasn't even an LLM. This was just somebody quoting a Reddit post that was quoting a fan on X. So, yeah. Watch your sources, kids.
So LLMs are averaging machines, but they're also something else. They're word association machines. If you understand how they represent language, they build a million-dimensional, which makes my brain hurt, but they build a million-dimensional map of language where all related words share an access in this amazingly complex space. And so the LLMs allow you to be fuzzy. They like, if you don't know the right words, but you have a vague idea, and you go to a search engine, you will do a lot of swearing. You may eventually get there, but oh my God, they're terrible at it, right?
Because you can't give them enough context for them to get there.
Right.
You can try.
Yes.
And do a lot of pluses and minuses, like make sure it has this word, but not this word. But yeah, there's a lot more swearing. You're right.
Yeah. Whereas the LLM, because it's a word association machine, the vague, fuzzy words will appear in the articles with the correct buzzword you have forgotten or don't yet know. And so the LLMs will magnetically hone in on the right bit of information, even with really vague words, because there is an association between the words you're using and the proper words. So they'll get you a lot further while being fuzzy, which is amazing and very helpful. But that doesn't mean you should just give up on using the right jargon when you have it. Because when you do use the right jargon, you basically hone in more tightly in its massive multidimensional space into the most relevant answers, because the most expert conversations on a topic will use the right jargon. So the closer you get to the right jargon, you're zooming the LLM into an ever smaller part of the universe to average. And so the answer you get is more accurate.
So it's funny, again, seeing the approaches of you're someone who knows the right jargon. I'm the person who can't remember the right jargon. I may have heard it, but I can't remember it. So a lot of my queries start with, so what's that thing, like when you've got like 3 across and 4 down, what's that called? What is it? An array? Yeah. Okay. So now we're talking about arrays. I can ask it the dumbest question and it never makes fun of me for not knowing the word. I can recognize it once it gives it to me, or I go, oh, okay, well that name makes sense. And then I can be precise, but it helps me find that word that I don't know. And it's kind of what I really like about LLMs is I don't have to know the precision of the words. I can get there.
Yes. Yeah, and this is what I'm encouraging, because you say that I don't have this problem, but I do now that I'm in my cybersecurity role. The amount of new technologies that appear every month is astonishing. Mm-hmm. There is so much that I need to learn, where I am the person who doesn't know the right word. And so I am that person
you have
asking
to know the
it
right word.
Right, but the LLM brings me there where search engines don't. So what I will do is I will talk to the LLM and I will notice the words it's using, and I will tune my language to get in tune with it. And whenever there's 2 terms that confuse me, which will happen, there's 2 words that in my mind, but they're the same, but they're not the same word. Why is it sometimes using one word or the other? I will ask it, in this context, what is the difference between an incident and a problem?
Okay.
Right. And it will then give me a table and it will really start to explain. Or I will say, what's the definition of this very generic word? Like in the context of Microsoft Defender Suite, what does event mean? Because it actually has a very specific meaning in that context.
Sure. And you'd never live long enough to get that answer out of Google. It would never happen.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is make use of the fact that it will help you hone in on jargon, but do hone in on the jargon, because the more of the right words you get into your prompts, the better the quality of the answers that I certainly find I get back out.
Okay.
And it will help you get there, which is why it's so cool. And this segues into the next point that I think took me a while to comprehend. A lot of people say, let's replace search engines with chat boxes. So my very first approach to AI was, here is an empty text box. I shall type in a prompt and I shall hit enter. I shall read the answer and then judge it based on that answer, and then be cranky or happy and move on with my life. That's like going up to someone to start a conversation, saying, hello, how are you? And walking away. These are designed for an interaction. So unlike Google, where each query is a standalone thing, these things have memory and they are honing in just like you are. So conversing is stupendously valuable, and following up and asking for more detail. And that is so valuable. But also, when you change topic, the LLM will have a button somewhere in the interface to say, start new conversation. If you're changing the topic, be explicit, click that button.
Right.
And
I've noticed one thing. I use ChatGPT a lot, and it remembers from session to session things I've told it about my environment. So even though I've created a new topic, it knows, like I remember one time it's saying, oh, you already have Keyboard Maestro. You could use that to write do this script. And I was like, how did you know that? And it said, oh, sweetie, you told me. And
told me that on December 6th or whatever.
Right. And they'll say, do you want to see that conversation? It's like, no, I believe you. You apparently knew that. So that was helpful. A little scary, that it's remembering things like that.
You can also go back to previous conversations.
Yeah.
So
I do that.
Both Lumo and Microsoft 365 Copilot, there's a little button, the hamburger button shows you a list of all your previous conversations. Mm-hmm. And the name by default is the first question you asked, but you can rename them. And you can just jump back in and pick up where you left off. And so if I ever need to pick up again, I will rename them to something sensible like learning about blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then I can get to them,
The other thing, and this could be an old wives' tale or a new wives' tale that I just chose to accept as truth, but if it bothers you how much energy we're using with LLMs, I heard that if you keep one long running conversation, it's got to ingest all of that data. Every question you ask, it's ingesting everything you've talked about in that conversation. So if you want to use less energy, start new topics whenever it's truly a new topic.
Yeah, that is not an old wives' tale. No, that is fundamental to the computer science of how these things work. That is totally correct, and it will remain true as long as we have LLMs.
Okay, so assuage a little bit of guilt. New topic.
Yeah. And the other thing to bear in mind is that our computational efficiency is increasing massively. So these LLMs are doing the same amount of work with way less energy. So you can't extrapolate into the future and say, if we keep going like this, then all the water on planet Earth will be on data centers. That's not how the math works.
Okay, good.
Now, where was I? So yes, conversations. Always remember you're having conversations. And it means that you can then use words like this, or you can talk like you would to a person because there is context. The conversation is context.
They have a memory.
Yes, exactly. They're not like Siri at the moment. Someday Apple promise we'll have Siri with a memory, but today, goldfish.
Not that day.
Yeah. And we've already mentioned favorite chatbots that show their sources. I find that so valuable to be able to check it out.
Yeah, Perplexity does that by default. It gives you a bunch of sources.
Yeah. So does Microsoft 365 Copilot, which makes it's the same brain as ChatGPT, but it's that brain with Microsoft's flavor. And one of the seasonings Microsoft adds is this telling you where it got its stuff from, which is a seasoning I enjoy.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the other thing, and we've hinted at this a few times, and your point about why you don't want to send giant big conversations is that context is king. So the LLM is an averaging machine, but it's not just averaging all of its training data. It's averaging all of its training data plus the context that you load into it at that instant in time. And at the very minimum, that context is your conversation. That is the minimal context. But you can, using a standalone chatbot, attach files and things, and they then become part of the context. But when you use an integrated tool, the environment it's integrated into, the reason you integrate it is to automate context. So if you're editing a source code file, the file, at the very least, say 20 lines above and below are automatically context. And in the early days of LLMs, when you just didn't have that much resources, you would limit the context. These days, you don't just take the whole file. You take every open tab, and in the case of VS Code, the project. So when you open a VS Code window and it has a tree structure down the side, that's your project. Okay. So when you're working in VS Code, that is your context. And the GitHub Copilot is aware of that whole context, which means when it gives you suggestions, it's weighting its averages towards how you do things because it knows that and it considers that more important than all the other stuff in the universe. So if you have a particular way you phrase your comments, you will see that echoed back at you. And this is why big code bases are amazing. because we have code bases in work that are a decade old, and they're very consistent in how we name things and how we structure things. And because this is a giant big folder of stuff that the LLM is ingesting, when it makes code suggestions, they're in our house style. I recognize
really?
the quirks of some of my colleagues in the suggestions.
That's kind of crazy.
That's amazing. And so when you're doing stuff that, like, I have personal stuff I've been working on for years, and I'm very pernickety about my comments. And when I use them for personal stuff, it will suggest the perfect comment based on the name of a function. Because it's like, oh, yeah, you want to make a new function called create blah, blah, blah. You're going to need these arguments. You're going to call them A, B, and C. And it'll offer me the description at the top of how I would describe it. It's like, oh,
really?
Thank you.
Really?
Yes.
So it's actually offering to name variables the way Bart names them, the way he capitalizes them. Wow. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
That's what blew my mind away. That's what took my skepticism just away. I was starting a JavaScript function, and I got as far as the opening bracket. So, functions space, name a function, open bracket, and it just suggested it. And I was like, that is 8 out of 10 perfect. And the rest, the 2 out of 10 that isn't perfect is so close, I'm going to accept this and then tweak those 2 lines. I was like, okay, this is not hype. But that doesn't happen in test projects, right? If you just give it an empty file, it doesn't have that extra context. So it's useful because it's giving you stuff based on all of GitHub, which is not useless, but it's not the full level of, that you will get from using it in bigger code bases.
Right. It's funny. My big excitement like that, but not nearly as cool as that, was just when I would start to write something like a for loop, and it would just fill it in, because it's going to say I++ at the end, or whatever. Why do you need to ever type that again? Because a billion times that's been typed into code editors. The average is it's going to be called this.
Yeah, and there's some things you just have to do so often, and it's a chore, right? You find you really hate doing this. And I used to sometimes make the time to make text expander snippets, but there's so many of them, and then you can't remember how to name them. The LLMs just do it way better than text expander ever could for me.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so that's one of the advantages of having the IDE integration, is just that the context is free. It just comes along. But it also means that it can offer you things like really good code completion. And it can, when it offers you a suggestion, so you can still have a conversation, and you can just refer, you don't even have to say in PowerShell, because you have a project open full of PowerShell files. That context is free. So you can just ask questions. What's the function to do X? And it won't give you a JavaScript answer because you're in PowerShell. So it will just tell you the PowerShell way of printing something or of averaging something. Whereas if I'm using a standalone bot, I have to tell it in JavaScript,
But are you often in a project doing things like the YAML stuff you talked about, and some jQuery, the JSON search thing? What's it called?
Yeah.
Not jQuery.
JQ.
Thank you. I was close. See, I'd have to look that up. But are you asking all those kinds of questions together? So how does it know which one you're asking about?
But one of your tabs is active.
Okay. So they're not mixed into the same... Okay.
Well, no, they are all in the context, but the current file is explicitly marked out. So you'll see in VS Code, if you look at the fine print, it will tell you what file it thinks you're talking about, just under your chat session, and it will be the currently open tab. But you can actually add extra context if you want, but I've never needed to because I'm always talking about the thing I'm looking at. That's kind of why I want the chat bot right next to me, is because I'm looking at it and I want to talk about it. And the default is the thing I'm looking at is the thing I'm talking to you about.
Right.
Like, okay, perfect.
It's almost like having a partner who's paying attention to what you just said.
And it's better than that, because if you put your cursor on a line, it knows what line your cursor is on. And if you select 5 lines of code, you can just call those 5 lines of code this.
Oh.
Because I have selected it.
That's neat.
Oh, that's so good. You'll see in the examples just being able to select some code and say, what does this do? And you literally just say, what does this do?
So you don't have to say line 42, or you don't have to say, this flag dash F. What does dash F mean when it's part of this? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You just say, what does this do? Or why is this minus for both instead of minus something else? And it would say, oh, okay, you're talking about that selected code, well, blah, blah, blah. And it's surprisingly good because it has all the context for free. And when you ask it to change this to do whatever, it will offer you the snippets in the sidebar with buttons like copy, which is very handy, just generically handy, or insert at your cursor, which is often, if you're asking it for new code, well, that's what you want. But the really coolest thing is when you're asking it to change your code, there's a button that looks like a plus and a minus, and it will do a diff. And it will offer you in red what you had and in green what it thinks you should have. And you just go, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And if there's like 5 or 6 times you made the same weird thing and it's like, yeah, this isn't working how I thought. How do I fix it? And it will say, well, you should be using this instead of that. And you go, apply. It will find them all. Not just the one right there in front of you. It will find them all. And you can even ask it to find them in all of your files. You can tell it, I want you to find this everywhere. And then you just go approve, 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 or reject. But it's, yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
And it doesn't add any value, but it does it with a cool animation. So it looks like a heat haze ripples over your code. And wherever the heat haze hasn't got to yet, hasn't been analyzed. And then wherever it has, you have the green and reds. And so you just see it rippling through your code.
I think there's great value in adding joy with animations like that. That's
I know.
That's useful.
Right. So I've been very, very positive, and I've explained why I think having it in your IDE is amazing. Now I need to give you a warning. And this is one of those things that we've all known hypothetically that you should never embed secrets like private keys or passwords or API keys into your code files. Because once you've committed them to Git, you actually can't delete them because those versions exist forever. So you've now just have these secrets sitting in that .git file. And if you publish that to GitHub and you accidentally make it a public repo for 5 minutes, every bot on the internet has just ingested your secrets.
Well, and I believe Copilot itself was trained on GitHub since it's all from Microsoft. So swings and roundabouts, right?
Yeah. So we should never have been putting secrets into our code. But if you're using an LLM, all of that context that makes it so powerful is being sent to the company you are trusting to provide you the chatbot. So you absolutely should understand how they treat your data and therefore whether or not you can edit this code at all. But no matter who they are, they shouldn't be getting your secrets.
Right.
Because they could have a data breach, right? Something could go wrong. They could promise you perfect secrecy, get hacked, and now you've given them your secrets. Don't do that.
And this has nothing to do with AI yet.
No. But of course, like I say, we're handing this off as context. So everything you have in that code base is going up to those servers, being processed and coming back down. And even if their policy is amazing and you're choosing for a product you pay for with your money instead of your privacy, stuff goes wrong. This is new tech. It has bugs. Stuff can accidentally leak. They can get hacked. So you can't assume once it leaves your computer that it'll be perfectly safe. So don't have any bloody secrets in your code if you turn on these AI agents. And the exact best practices are going to be different for every language, but 99% of the time, the answer is stick it in an environment variable. So far, every language I use, the answer is stick it in an environment variable. And then when you run the code, you just add the environment variable, and then it gets put in at runtime.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. But it's easy to forget. Very important not to. So the rest of this is just anecdotes. These are things I encountered on my journey that were cool enough to make me go, "Oh, I'm going to take the time to grab screenshots." And they're about stuff that I don't feel bad sharing. And when I had the mental time and energy to capture them. Cool things have happened when I was in a hurry, and they're gone, right? The result is baked in and doing something cool, but I didn't capture them. But these ones, I just had the presence of mind. So this is not like the perfect example. These are anecdotes, but they're interesting, I think.
I think they are, and I think they're fun.
Oh, good. So my first example is using a plain old chatbot, right? Sometimes you're not in an IDE. One of the places I'm writing a lot of code these days is Excel. And Excel is not in an IDE.
No.
And Excel is really powerful, but the syntax goes back a long way. So it's like in shouty all caps, right? Excel is just shouting at you everywhere. And it tends to use 3-letter names or 4-letter names because it's from a time when you abbreviated everything. So it's like subtract is sub. Add is add. That one works fine.
But there's a lot of stuff longer than that. Like as long as I live, I will never correctly spell concatenate. I type CON and I wait for it to give me some choices. I'm pretty sure the next letter is a C, but there's always like an N in the wrong place when I spell it. Why is that one so long?
That one is weird, actually. I would have expected that to be concat. But no, it's a full-on concatenate.
I could spell that.
Yeah. So I need a lot of help with my Excel is what I'm saying. And this is an example. So I had a CSV that came out of a tool giving me a report on a whole bunch of Mac version numbers. And they were in the format major version, minor version, patch version. So 15.4.1. And I know Excel can split on period and extract only the first one. Because what I wanted was a new column of just the major number. Like, I don't care which flavor of macOS 15. Just, is this macOS 15? Right? Does this row relate to macOS 15?
Okay.
So I just literally asked it. And because I was not in a built-in tool, I was just in a generic chatbot, I had to give it context. So I said, in Excel, how do I get a new column with the major version extracted from a 3-part version number column? And it thought about it very briefly. It gave me some nice English, but basically it told me straight up, equals left, a comma find, period, comma, A2 minus 1. Okay.
You know, what's interesting is you didn't tell it that the number, the major version number would be, or the version number at all would be something dot something dot something. It guessed that from what you said.
Oh, I said 3-part version number. You're right, actually. Yeah, it figured out that it will be a dot.
Yeah, I would have said, I've got a number, I've got number dot number dot number. How do I separate it? And I just want the first one.
Yeah. Now, it did tell me its assumption, right? So E.G 2.5.13. So it's like, okay, so it's assuming that.
Right.
And then it also says, well, you didn't tell me what column it is, so I'm going to assume it's column A. And you didn't tell me where the row starts, and it told me I'm going to assume cell A2. So it's assuming a heading followed by the first bit of data, which isn't bad. Now, it happened to be in C, but that's a really easy fix. Even I can do that, right?
So unless you were looking back to OS 9, you could have just said left parentheses A2 comma 2. Because it's a 2-digit.
2 versions, wouldn't they?
Yeah, two digits.
Yeah.
But
well,
hey,
I did
this is a
find one going back
command.
to 11.
It's still 2 digits.
I know, but I'm saying I got as close as I got down to 11, which surprised me.
Not supported, as it turns out.
Yeah. So I got that, and then that put some shape on my data, and then I started looking at my data more, and I was like, you know something? This isn't actually my real question. My real question is, which of these rows refer to unsupported macOS, and which of these refer to supported macOS? That's actually what I care about. The major version number was just useful. I actually need more. I don't remember. I really don't remember where Microsoft had gotten to at this stage.
You mean Apple?
So Apple. So I started a new chat because very different topic, right? I said, what versions of macOS are still supported by Apple? And it came back actually quite a bit more detailed than I really needed, but it did get me to the bottom of the line, which is basically 13 and older not supported. All right, thank you. That's actually all I needed, right? Just
now, did
13
you trust
or less.
this to be a fact, or did you double check it?
I
would have
trusted this
double-checked
because it wasn't that important.
Okay. All right.
It was as a manager of mine very cleverly said, this is an economics exercise, not an accounting exercise.
Okay. Okay.
Vague and fluffy is fine. I just love that phrasing. Say, oh, vague and fluffy is fine. I can do that.
That was a heartbreaking moment in my life when I found out that economics is not at all scientific. It's a religion.
Because a lot of it is, but there is real science economics.
There are sects, though. It's like, are you a believer in this one or this one? Keynesian, I think, is one of them. That was really
Keynesian
upsetting.
is one of the schools.
Yeah.
It's a bit like philosophy. There are different, like, Jungian philosophy.
I thought it was math. Okay, moving on.
Some of it is. Some of it's very math. Oh, some of it's really math. Anyway. So I now had my answer, but now I actually needed to make a useful column, which is, I want you to basically take my newly created column of version numbers, and I need another column that just tells me EOL for end of life or supported, because I was going to do conditional formatting. If row D was EOL, bright red. If row D was supported, happy green. Right?
Okay.
That way my spreadsheet would be useful.
So you had to build a little... okay. No, you just knew it was anything less than 14 would be unsupported. Okay.
Yeah. So I just wanted a new column so that I could then put the conditional format based on that. I could have done it, I guess, in one step, conditional format based on whether the column I already had. I was like, nah, just make me a column that says EOL or supported, because I like to make extra columns. So I do. Yeah.
Your spreadsheet doesn't weigh anymore if it's got that. So.
It took me a while to realize. And if you use actual tables with named columns, they don't go AA. They just keep having sensible names. So have at it, and you can hide them. Hide. Right. So I just literally asked it in Excel, if I have a column with numbers, how do I make a new column with the value EOL if the number is less than 14 or supported otherwise? And it came back with a very sensible formula. If A2 less than 14, comma EOL, comma supported, because the if function takes an argument of a condition, what to do if that condition is true, and what to do if that condition is false. Perfect. It gives me a little explanation as well.
I do have a beef in the next thing. It says, drag the formula down the column to apply it to the rest of the rows.
Not in a table.
What's that?
Not in a table.
No. That's not wrong. It's just less efficient.
Sure.
You could double click on the corner, and as long as it's got data in those cells right next to it, it'll just go all the way down.
Double click.
Faster than...
I've started to use tables, and then it applies all the way down.
I have no idea
Explicitly
what you mean.
say format as table. That then creates a data structure in your Excel sheet.
Okay.
Which makes it look more like numbers, which makes me happy because I learned in numbers.
Oh, I have one other thing I don't like about it. It wrote E0L, not EOL, in its explanation.
That's a good point.
It's correct in the formula, luckily. Okay. Well, that's pretty fun.
Okay. Yeah. Turns out it didn't work.
Oh.
But it looks good.
Mm-hmm.
I did it exactly as it gave it to me, changing the column numbers. And it showed me that everything was supported, including macOS 11. Pretty sure that's not supported. So because it's a conversation, I literally just told the LLM what was wrong. Didn't bother giving it lots of context. It had the context. I just went, this wrongly shows 11 as supported. That was all I had to say, because it's a conversation. And it went, oh, thanks for pointing out. The formula showing as 11 suggests the cell might not be recognized as a number. Possibly it's stored as text, which is probably true because we got it by splitting a string. So it probably is a string.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had been smart enough before I went to the LLM to actually format the cell as general, not text. No, I formatted as number and told it only to have 0 decimal places, but that didn't do the trick. Thankfully, it gave me 3 suggestions, and I just jumped straight to the third, which looks the most generic, just assumes there might even be trading space. So it uses value and trim to like remove any white space, convert it to an actual value, and then do the less than 14. That worked perfectly.
Now, I'd really hope to make fun of you for asking for Excel help, but I don't know that I knew that you could say if value and just get past the text problem. I spent a lot of time copying and pasting as number and things like that.
Paste as value and stuff like that?
Paste as value, yeah. Yeah, but that's a lot easier. Just ignore the fact that it's silly. You know how to figure out if the text value of 4 is 4. You do it.
Exactly.
I'm going to say they've added this recently. That's what I'll say.
This is the
That's
thing we were
just to
talking
get
about
us
this
some
before
email.
the show. Yeah, because the syntax looks old-fashioned, but Excel is evolving. It's developing new capabilities all the time, like named columns.
I didn't actually know you could name columns.
If you make them a real table. Yeah, if you make them an explicit table, they get names, and you can refer to them by name with square brackets. Oh, it's so cool.
I got to see what you mean about this table nonsense. You kids today and your crazy tables.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an evolution. And so basically that worked like a charm. I put on my conditional format in a few seconds, and I was able to make infinitely more sense of my data. Unfortunately, there was a lot more red on my spreadsheet than green, and in an ideal world, it would have been all green, but it wasn't. So my second example is in GitHub Copilot in VS Code. GitHub Copilot hallucinates and may not actually be the best solution for generic philosophical questions, which was a revelation to me. So sometimes when you want something philosophical, you're better off in a generic chatbot.
Well,
which, like I say, surprised me.
But let's not poke at Copilot. All of its little friends hallucinate. A lot.
They do. I guess the real point is if you don't get a good answer in one AI, if there's a particularly generic question, maybe leave the specialized environment and you might get a better answer. Because I'm not going to say you're always going to get a better answer, because like I say, they all hallucinate, but they don't hallucinate about the same thing. So sometimes Microsoft 365 Copilot gives me a terrible answer to a question, and I take the exact same question and I shove it into Lumo, and Lumo gives me a great answer. And then I say this to people and they go, oh, yeah, but I gave Lumo this question and it gave me a terrible answer. And then I gave that question to ChatGPT and it gave me an amazing answer. And they're not wrong.
Right.
So if you don't get the right answer, go somewhere else. Get a second opinion. I guess there we go.
Get a second opinion if it looks right.
That's actually
if the doctor tells you you're fine and your arm is falling off, you don't just go, okay, great.
Thank you. Okay. So to set the scene, I needed to go back and add a new feature to an existing giant big PowerShell script. Big long code file. Because it was very talkative and I needed it to shut up. So I needed to add a flag -quiet, which would basically suppress all of its helpful little, I'm doing this, and now I'm doing this, and now I'm doing this. The only thing I wanted it ever to put on the command line was errors. So if I say -quiet, all it's going to show me is nothing or errors.
Okay.
So that's why we needed a -quiet flag. And you can do that by wrapping the whole thing in an if statement. But if you wrap the whole thing, then you end up with if this condition print, if this condition print. And I like my code to be English, so a lot of languages have an unless keyword. So instead of saying if not, so if not quiet, you say unless quiet, print. So I couldn't remember if PowerShell was one of those. So I just basically went, is there an unless keyword? And they went, nope, PowerShell doesn't have one of those. And it offered me some suggestions and a few little snippets of how I could write it. I was like, yeah, if that's spread over 3 lines, that means this every single print statement now becomes 3 lines of code. That's just going to fill my code up with mess. And I'm going to lose track of the algorithm inside all of these big print statements. And I was like, no, I don't like this. I don't like this answer. So I asked, well, okay, there's another way you can do a similar thing in languages that don't have unless. It's called a postfix if. So if you're writing code where you want to do something if a condition is true, you probably want if some condition do something, and that's how you'd say it in English. If the balance is negative, don't allow the purchase. And so the English and the code are in the same shape, right? You say
Okay.
if, condition, action.
Right.
But if you want to say print this unless we're in quiet mode, the print this is actually the important bit, and that's what you want at the front of the line. So when you're scanning through your code. So some languages allow you to put the if on the end if the if is only for one single statement. So you could never do it with curly brackets. It would just be for the one line. And so Perl lets you do that, which I really like. So you'd say print something if not quiet mode enabled. And so when you're scanning through your code, it's much easier to see your print statements without getting distracted by the condition that's just there for tidiness.
Oh, right.
And so I was like, well, maybe I can do that. If I can't have my unless keyword, maybe I can have this. So I said, can I use a postfix form of if? I said, one reference used to list my PS1 file. Great. Yeah. PowerShell supports that. Not a problem. Here's an example. Is it equivalent to this 3 lines? Cool. It even lists some caveats, which makes it sound like it knows what it's talking about. Hint, it doesn't. This looks very believable. We have these three notes at the bottom. Only single statements can be used before if. Cannot use a block. For multiple statements, use the standard if block. But that's exactly how it works in other languages.
Oh.
You've just hallucinated a PowerShell feature that doesn't exist. So the problem is it's not invalid code, because write host takes arbitrarily many arguments. So it doesn't give you a compile time error. It just prints the thing every single time, followed by the word if, which it sees as a string because it's not expecting any operators. This is a list of arguments. You've given me if. Oh, you must have meant the string if. So it just prints hello if, and then it does the math on the condition and prints true or false. So all of my print statements were there followed by if true, if true, if true, if true.
Not exactly what you wanted. And weren't you trying to make
Not
this
exactly
quiet?
what I wanted. Yeah, exactly. So I actually just asked the same question to Lumo, and Lumo went, nope, doesn't do that. Some languages do. PowerShell doesn't. You have to use the full version of if. Okay, thank you, Lumo. I grudgingly went, and then did it the other way.
Wow.
So they do lie.
So the thing I keep thinking about is we had a friend a long time ago. It was a boyfriend of a roommate of mine, and Steve and I both became friends with him. And he was really fun. He was really interesting. We had a great time with him, and he talked to Steve about how he knew how to do technical climbing, like where you punch things into the cliff and hang off of ropes and everything.
Pitons, I think they're called, aren't they?
There you go. And Steve actually went out with him doing it, and he had a great time with him. But over time, we started noticing he would say things that weren't quite true. And it turned out this guy was a pathological liar. He, like, more and more started coming out. Things it turned out Steve just got really lucky he wasn't lying about that and didn't fall to his death. But I feel like that with like, I made really good friends with Claude, and then Claude just started to lie to me. And now I don't trust anything, Bart. I every
Good.
single thing, whether it's economics or it's what was the other option? Economics or
Accounting.
accounting.
Especially if it's accounting, right? If you need it to be exact.
Even if it's economics, man, I still, because I'm going to quote it to somebody. I'm going to say it. And if it's not true, man, I hate that.
Oh, so you know the way, thanks to podcasting, I've got into the habit of remembering where I learned something so I can say, listener so-and-so said such and such. I do the same for everything an LLM tells me. And I will actually say to someone, GitHub Copilot told me blah, blah, blah. Actually, that doesn't happen very often, apart from to my darling beloved who's a coder. Usually, Lumo told me such and such. Because you do have to, it's the same as like my friend Bob. Or it's a bit like saying, oh, one of my friends said. Because that's about as much value as the statement has.
Yeah, except I have a lot of friends who are credible. When they say stuff, they most of the time. Like if I say my friend Bart told me, there's like a 98% chance that what he told me was accurate and true. I can't get you to answer questions on the fly. I beg you to just wing it, and you won't do it because you got to be accurate. And, Tom Merritt's the same way. But
How dare we?
But I don't know any chatbots that don't lie at least like, I don't know, 20, 30% of the time. I mean, it's not rare. It's a lot.
True, and it's not very binary because it's a real glass half full thing. I see people who want to not like AI, and they will get an answer from a chatbot that is 75% really helpful and 25% gobbledygook, and they will just go, see? They'll ignore all the useful stuff, and they just go, see?
Sure.
And then you have people who are convinced chatbots are the answer to life, the universe, and everything, and they'll ignore the 25% of absolute rubbish and go, see?
Yep. Absolutely.
Right. Anyway, my last example is probably the most fun one because this gives you a really, really good example of me in the very, very real world. This is my life these days. This is very, very much what I do. So one of the things I'm spending a lot of time doing is managing hundreds. Notice that we're not talking about 10 servers or tens of servers. We're talking about hundreds of servers. And if they need to pass an audit, they may all need to have their SSH session or settings changed to not use a cipher that's no longer secure enough. They may all need to have some sort of Apache setting change if they have Apache installed and so forth. That's a big job. And if I did that manually, I would get very little else done in life. And it would be a very bad use of my time. So we need a management tool. And that's what Ansible does for us, right? Ansible is like group policies on steroids. It lets you just take your Linux servers. And what you actually do is you describe using YAML, INI, and JSON what you want reality to be. You're actually defining reality or desired reality. And Ansible's job is to make it true.
Okay.
Which is so fun because you literally define these packages must be installed. This setting must be enabled. This setting must be disabled. And then when you apply the role, it just goes through and it goes, okay means this was already like you wanted. I haven't changed anything. Changed means I have made reality match your desire. And error means I tried. This server, I couldn't make it match your desired reality. Okay. And so if you have to pass an audit, you just run Ansible that asserts all of these servers have this really bad cipher disabled. It'll go, okay. You get a report and it just says 100% okay, 0% changed, 0% failed.
Okay, Ansible's not an AI.
No, absolutely not. Ansible is very not an AI.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
But you write and you define desired reality in this cocktail of different languages, and it makes perfect sense why all these languages are in the mix, because you're doing a very complicated thing. And I'm really glad they didn't write their own language, that they piggybacked off existing technologies, but there are a few of them in the mix here. So I'm writing all of this Ansible stuff, and I'm learning Ansible and I'm getting better at it. I'm having to remember, am I YAML here? Yeah, I'm YAML here. I'm INI here. I'm JSON here. I'm Jinja 2 templates over here. And all this is going on at the same time. And so this is where these chatbots just help so much. And the buzzword, by the way, if you're curious, is infrastructure as code. So you're describing your infrastructure in text files, which means you can put them in Git. So you can version reality in Git. Right.
I like that.
And so then when you put something to change control, you have to say, what would you do to roll back? And the answer is literally, I would check out this copy of reality and I would reapply. So you actually reapply reality because you're a time machine.
Bart, I think we're going to have an intervention on you.
Well, you see why I like this tool, right? So I give an example in the show notes. If you need to set up a website, you might say, I need 15 web servers, 3 MySQL servers, 2 load balancers. The web servers should have these packages, these configurations. Check out these Git repositories. Ta-da! You've now made a website with all this infrastructure, and you've defined it as code.
What do we need sysadmins for anyway?
To write the Ansible scripts.
That is magical to me, Bart, that can be done. That's crazy.
But think about scale, right?
Sure.
The things you do on your one server have to be done on hundreds of servers. It's the same tasks, but you automate them with a tool like Ansible. There's another one called Puppet, another one called Chef, but that's what these things do. Anyway, I needed to make a new role because something very annoying happened to all the European universities all at once because we'd centrally procured certificates from a certificate authority. It went terribly, horribly wrong, and we all have to change now, all at the same time, and we're all very cranky. But I need to change a lot of TLS certs of all kinds using the Acme protocol, which is one of my favorite names because I just think Roadrunner and cool stuff. It's actually the protocol Let's Encrypt invented, but they made it open source, so you can use Acme to talk to other certificate authorities, which is very useful. So I need to reconfigure hundreds of certificates. So I'm working in Ansible here to define a role to do this for me. And I'm coding away, I'm in a YAML file, and it does one of its magic tricks where I actually typed the comment to say what I wanted to do. That's another little trick, by the way. I always write comments first and then fill in the code. If you're working with an AI, you're literally telling it what you wanted to do, and the completions it offers are amazing. So I literally started a comment saying I needed to gather together a variable to capture something called SAN names. So a certificate can have alternative names. So your one certificate could cover 5 domain names. They're called service alternate names, or SANs. And I needed to take a string of those and break them into an array. And I literally just started typing a comment, and it offered me 10 lines of near perfect code. Oh, wow. Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I want. Accept.
Or and I'm change here a little bit here and there. But
yeah. I'm reading through it going, that's how I do it, that's how I do it, that's how I do it. Oh, that's a really short technique. And at a glance, it's very elegant. But I don't understand exactly how it works. So either this is brilliant or invented.
Or wrong. Yeah. Or invented, yeah.
So I highlighted it because I'm in my integrated IDE. So I selected the line that I was confused about, and I literally said, explain this line. That's my full prompt because it has all the context for free. Explain this line. And it says this line, and then it quotes it back to me just in case I couldn't see what anyway. It may have got its context wrong, so it quotes it back at me. And then it breaks it down. And it tells me piece by piece what it's doing. And I was like, okay. This is what I hoped it would do. And if I had written this code, I learned to do it a different way that was literally 5 times as long. It was horrible the way I used to do this kind of thing. But it's a really elegant Ansible code. So, oh, thank you. But remember I said earlier, these kind of things would be average. That means that if you provided a list of strings that are comma separated, this code is perfect. And it genuinely is. But it's perfectly reasonable to have a web server certificate covering one website. In fact, it's common. It's very common. It's more common than having one certificate for multiple websites. So the list of SANs is very often empty. Edge case.
Oh, okay.
So I asked it, can this handle an empty string? It went, well, it'll result in an array of length 1 containing an empty string. That's not what I want. No SANs should give me an empty array, not an array with an empty string. Right?
Okay.
They are very different things. But then it went on and said, if you change it like this, then it will result in empty array. It's like, well, that is exactly what I want. I want you to take empty string and give me empty array, please. So I let it do that, and it suggested the fix, and the fix included a piece of syntax. I think I understood, but I was a bit. I never used that. I remember reading about it in the docs. So I asked, what does greater than sign minus mean on this line? And it said, oh, that's a block scalar indicating folded syntax. Okay, fine. It's not changing the meaning of the code. This isn't going to have spooky action at a distance. Okay, thank you. That just made it easier to read. Tickety-boo.
I love that. It you've consolidated it down into the basics of what it said, but it gave you a lot more context and color and flavor around it that you could believe it.
Yeah. And it triggered enough of my memory to go, oh yeah, I did remember reading about that. Yeah, I never have used it. Oh, okay. This is good context, right? Great. So I hit save and I tested my new Ansible role and it failed. It just gave me an error. It gave me a really weird error. But I knew exactly what section of the code had made the error. So this is the superpower of having the context. So I selected the code I knew was causing the error, and I copied and pasted the error text. And I asked, why does the selected line cause the following error? And I literally connected the two dots.
Mm-hmm.
I had tried the error message on its own in a search engine. It gave me garbage. Absolutely useless garbage. But connecting the two together like that allowed the LLM to explain it to me perfectly. It hallucinated one of the operators
So
in
this
that
was lines
nice
of code
line
it
of
had
code.
written. It had written.
Yeah,
this.
I know. There's an irony here. Yeah. So it's actually select length is not valid Jinja 2 syntax. It probably is valid mustache, which is probably why it hallucinated that, but it's not valid
and
Jinja 2.
probably why it looked okay to you.
Probably.
That's
But it
insidious.
Yeah, but I said, well, actually, the select filter expects truthy or defined, not length. Oh, truthy. Well, that's actually exactly what we're doing with here. So an empty string isn't truthy. That's actually perfectly fine. So I literally just said, if you want to filter out empty strings, use select truthy. Oh, okay. That is what I want. And it offered me the code snippet with those 3 useful buttons I mentioned earlier. So the one to merge it into my code, the one to insert at the cursor, and the one to send to the clipboard. So I clicked the merge button because I needed to edit existing code, not insert new code.
Okay.
And it did the cool ripple effect. And the next thing I saw is then this red line, green line in the next screenshot, which looks very familiar to anyone who's used Git, because that's how you show diffs.
Right.
And it just shows me it's the same line of code with length replaced with truthy. And a little tick box to say, yep.
Nice.
So there we were. I retested my role. Perfect. I was able to automate in minutes hundreds of certificates.
Oh,
Security, tick.
Fantastic. I want to back up real quick to the hallucination thing. I added a link in the show notes to suggest that if people don't think the hallucination problem is really happening, or they want any validation of this, OpenAI themselves, the people who've created ChatGPT, did a study on hallucination by AI, and they determined that it's a mathematical certainty that this will happen. It's not something that can be engineered out. And in their study, their model looked worse than some of the other models they studied of why it was happening and how it was happening. So don't hope that this just stops. It's not going to. It's life with AI.
No, life with LLMs. It's a feature of how the LLMs work. So if we develop another type of AI.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go along with that. LLMs, yeah. Because the title is Why Language Models Hallucinate. You can read the whole paper. There's a nice little cover sheet that tells you what the too long didn't read part.
If you think of it as a programmer, all valid syntax isn't valid semantics. You can have things that are grammatically correct and are nonsense. And a large language model cannot tell the difference between something that is like purple dishwashers sleep restlessly. That's
the same thing.
Garbage.
Yeah.
But an LLM can't understand why. And it's because of how they represent information, because they don't have knowledge. And they don't have a model of reality. They don't have something called epistemology. And so when you have a representation of the universe simplified to the way they simplify the universe, it can't not hallucinate, because you've taken real reality and you've thrown away lots of detail because you can't fit it into these LLMs. And the act of throwing away reality means they will hallucinate, inevitably.
Yeah, there's actually, I heard an explanation on the Accidental Tech podcast that got actually further into how the hardware affects hallucinations. And I mean, this is really, really complicated stuff. But from a programmer perspective, I think, I know I've talked about this on other shows we've been on. There was a software development company that found people kept complaining that a certain function wasn't working properly. And it was a function that didn't exist in their tool. But they couldn't figure out what was going on because people kept complaining that it wasn't working properly. And they've discovered that one of the AIs just kept telling people that it existed, and it didn't.
And it was probably re-ingesting posts on the internet talking about it.
Right. So it was garbaging itself. It was eating its own tail. And so their only solution was they implemented the feature. That's all they could do. They had to implement it because everybody thought it existed. They couldn't fight it.
Oh, a self-fulfilling hallucination.
Yeah.
I've seen it all now.
Yeah. Resistance is futile. Well, I like all these examples, Bart. This has been great.
Yeah. So I guess I've ended the show notes with some final thoughts. So I think we should wrap up this conversation the same way. So I was really skeptical, and it smelled like a lot of hype. And actually, I heard someone say this to me really well on another podcast. 80% of the money being thrown at AI startups is wasted, but the other 20% of that money is doing amazing things. It's just really hard to tell which is which.
Just can't tell the difference, right?
And I was like, well, yeah, these LLMs do all sorts of things wrong, and they can't do half of the stuff the hype merchants trying to sell you stuff promise. But that doesn't mean that the stuff they can do isn't amazing. Just don't believe them when they tell you you can fire half of your workers and replace them with AI. You can't. What you can do is make your best workers even better. And the weird thing is, in my experience, these LLMs are like force multipliers. So the more force you have by your own ability, the better you multiply more, you get even more. So if you're a force multiplier, what you're doing is you're making everybody better and the good people muchly better. So as an organization, you can end up being a lot more productive. But not by replacing the humans, by making them superhumans.
I hope that stays the case. We'll find out.
We don't know, right? I mean, we can't futurecast here, but certainly my experience with these things is anyone who's telling you we're just going to replace all the humans, no, not this. Something else might, but not this, which
not
is
yet.
Good. And I would say don't judge the tools too quickly, because it's almost like, do you know the way people say a cat trains you? You sort of end up tuning into how the cat communicates. Mm-hmm. I have, myself and GitHub Copilot have found each other, because I have discovered that you can say the same thing, technically the same, but actually differently. And you end up tuning into these things because they're machines that mimic certain aspects of language. And so we humans can tune into that. I'm not saying they're sentient or conscious, but they do have something like a personality because they're language machines and we're language machines. And so you actually do sort of tune into them, and you get better at getting more out of them by using them more. And so whatever you get out of them on day 1, you'll get more out of them on day 100, more out of them probably still on day 1,000. So don't give up on them too quickly. But I guess, well, the other thing is, of course, everyone's experience is completely different. But my 4 big takeaways are, first and foremost, make an informed decision about which tools you will use, having read their privacy statements and having compared that to what it is you're asking them to do. So if you're working on open source code and the company's promised to ingest all of your data, well, it's public data anyway. Who cares? But if you're a startup working on a super secret project, you should probably spend the money on an AI that will give you AI in exchange for money instead of AI in exchange for privacy. Because you are always paying. Do you pay with money or privacy money? And you need to decide that and do that consciously. And always think in terms of conversations. It's not a search engine, it's a chatbot. Converse, go back and forth. That's where the real value comes out, is in the back and forth. And I'm hoping the examples showed why you don't just take the first answer, you dig in more.
Right.
I would say use the right tool for the right job. When you have specialized AIs integrated into your tooling, they're probably better for that job than a generic chatbot. Use the right tool for the right job. And I think you need to start thinking about typing a secret into a code file as being equivalent of walking into your boss and swearing at his face or her face or their face. Right? It should be as much of a and you should just never do it. So just get to the point where it's muscle memory that you're about to type a private key or a password into code and you don't. In the same way that you start to go fudge when you're in an important meeting.
Oh, that sounds like really good advice. If you relate those two or connect those two in your head, it'll help give you that visceral reaction of, oh, I don't want to get fired today. Oh, same thing.
Exactly. So I really do treat passwords like swear words.
That's perfect. I love it. Well, this was the definition of tidbit, I've just realized, really means it's not part of the cohesive plot of what we're talking about in Programming by Self. It does not mean a short episode.
That's true. That's very true. Cool. Anyway, until we're back with more normal programming, happy computing.
If you learn as much from Bart each week as I do, I'd like you to go over to lets-talk.ie and press one of the buttons over there to help support him. He does 98% of the work here. I'm just the stooge that listens to him and asks the dumb questions. If you go over to lets-talk.ie, you can support him on Patreon, you can donate via PayPal, or you can use one of his referral links. I really hope you'll go over and help him out. In the meantime, you can contact me at Podfeet or check out all of the shows we do over there over at podfeet.com. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.